This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Maggie. Now, she'd had a strange life, never known any other children. It's on account of how she was raised. You see, her parents were famous biologists working on ways to save the endangered animals of the rainforest and the like. And because of that, Maggie'd spent her entire life on expeditions to lush tropic rainforests or dry African savanna. Not that Maggie was lonely or lacked for anything. There were always lots of people around, but they were all grown-ups who never had any time to play with her. And that's where Maggie's monkey came in. Truth be told, he wasn't really a monkey. He was a gorilla, a 486-pound bull gorilla Maggie decided to name Mr. Bigglesworth, and he was Maggie's best friend. Whenever she needed someone to talk to, laugh with, or even a kind shoulder to cry on, Mr. Bigglesworth was there for Maggie. He helped her with her correspondence school lessons and her gymnastics, but I fear he was no help at all when it came to ballet. But alas, all good things must come to an end. For one day, when Maggie received her correspondence school graduation diploma, a sad realization dawned upon them. She'd done so splendidly well at school that she'd won a full scholarship to the university. But she'd have to leave family and friends to further her education. As she packed her things and prepared to leave for the university, tears began to well up in the great ape's eyes. Maggie tried to comfort him, saying that she'd write and send photos, but it just didn't seem to do the trick. Mr. Bigglesworth was inconsolable. Months passed as Maggie began her studies at the university. Finally, Maggie's parents received her first report card. They opened it with great expectations, but she wasn't doing nearly as well as they'd hoped. It was quite obvious to all that Maggie was homesick for Mr. Bigglesworth, too. Her troubles compounded themselves during the second semester. She'd fallen so far behind that it appeared that she was in grave danger of flunking out. And it was with that feeling of trepidation that she returned home during spring break. They greeted her at the airstrip. Everyone was there. Her parents, the other biologists, and of course, Mr. Bigglesworth. Oh, they had a marvelous time. Everyone exchanged stories, bringing each other up to date on goings-on at the school and in the field. But most of all, Maggie was just happy to be home with her dear friend, Mr. Bigglesworth. For it seems he had been in a deep state of depression. No amount of bananas could erase his perpetual frown. They'd spent a marvelous 2 weeks, hiking, swimming, and playing together as if they'd never been apart. But then it was time for Maggie to return to university. Mr. Bigglesworth cried as she packed her bags. He was so heartbroken he was unable even to see her off. He must have gone to some remote corner of the jungle to cry his ape eyes out. They waited as long as they could, but no one could find the great ape, and the weather was closing in, so Maggie left without saying goodbye. The weeks passed, and Maggie'd made a dramatic reversal at school. The marks on her essays and written work rebounded to their former stellar heights, so much so that the school decided to award her the prize for Most Improved Student. Her parents were thrilled, and they made the long journey to the university for the awards presentation. But when they got there, they realized that Maggie would ask about Mr. Bigglesworth and how he was doing. And the problem was, the monkey was gone, and they feared the worst. The great ape was so distraught at the loss of Maggie's company that he had wandered off into the jungle, possibly never to be seen again. So, they attended the ceremony and watched with great pride as Maggie accepted her award. As they walked back to her dorm room, her mother asked, "Aren't you going to ask about Mr. Bigglesworth, dear?" "Oh, he's fine," Maggie said happily as she opened her door. For inside sat the great ape, happily pounding away at her typewriter. "Hey," she said, "is my book report ready yet?" This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Maggie, who, with the help of her friend, Mr. Bigglesworth, monkeyed around all the way to a doctorate in English literature.